Are you thinking about starting or nourishing a career in menstrual cycle health? Then consider joining our 9-month online holistic hormone and cycle coaching certification training. In this training, you get science-backed and evidence-based education, as well as teachings about the somatic aspects of having a menstrual cycle, functional nutrition, hormone testing, and much, much more. We will have incredible live group sessions, and you will get guidance from me. There will also be amazing guest teaching lectures from experts in the field, and at the end you will receive an official certificate of completion that is globally recognized. As a listener of the Planting Seeds podcast, you receive an additional €100 off when you use the code PODCAST when you sign up. Click on the link in the show notes to learn more. Hello, friends. This episode, when I think back to when I was recording this episode with Sarah, it just warms my heart. She's such a woman of my heart, and she's such a good storyteller. And we spoke about a topic that is very dear to me, namely spirit babies. I read a book called Spirit Babies a couple of years ago, and it completely changed how I look at preconception, how I look at becoming a mother, how I look at, how our children communicate with us. And, you don't have to believe this, but from anthropological evidence and from stories from cultures all over the globe, there is a trend where people believe that our babies already communicate with us before they're here. And in some African cultures, it is even believed that we can sing our babies into existence, and that they will choose their song and we sing the song for them before conception, during conception, after conception, during pregnancy, and then we sing their song after they're born. There's so much evidence throughout the world and many cultures where this is the way people look at having children. And if I think about that in comparison to, the very scientific, plain way in which my culture looks at having children, I really feel super poor in cultural heritage. So it's refreshing and enlightening to meet people like Sarah who look at this quite magical process of, bringing forth humans into this world. It's pretty wild and pretty magical. So it was such a blessing to speak with her and to learn more about spirit babies from her, to learn about her connection with the writer of the book that I read. The book is called Spirit Babies, and her journey of becoming someone who does spirit baby readings, so is supporting parents on their journey. Hearing her own story with her own pregnancies just blew my mind. And I'm just very grateful that she came on to share about such a delicate topic. I know these types of topics get a lot of judgment, but hearing her speak about it so clearly and beautifully and respectfully, it humbles me to my knees. And I hope that this episode will humble you as well, and that it maybe may open your heart and mind to new ideas about how we can look at becoming parents, having children, and communicating with our children even when they're not here yet. So enjoy listening and let me know how you feel after listening to this episode.
Hello, friends. My name is Iris Josephina. I'm your host, and you are listening to the Planting Seeds podcast. On the Planting Seeds podcast, we explore how we can cultivate a more gentle relationship with our cyclical bodies, the earth, each other, and the world around us through using our senses, science, the subtle, and the sacred. On Planting Seeds, we talk about all those topics you've always wanted to talk about. We are shamelessly opening up the conversations that we all so desperately need to settle in our precious bodies and relate to each other in a more open, truthful, and empowered way. I'm so glad you're here today.
Welcome everyone to a new episode of the Planting Seeds podcast. Today we will be talking about a topic that feels really magical and really dear to my heart. And I'm here today with Sarah, and she will be sharing with us about spirit babies. Welcome to the show, Sarah.
Thank you.
Could you maybe start by telling us a little bit about yourself and your story?
Of course. Let's see. Well, I'd like to share that for me, this journey of being a woman in this life was always such a mystery for so long. I remember thinking as a young girl that I didn't want to have children. I didn't want to be a mother. I was really, for no reason that I could put my finger on, just very afraid of birth and the process of childbirth. And I was like fiercely independent and strong in myself, and just kind of wanted to seize the world with my heart and my curiosity. And I found myself at a young age becoming a mother. It's funny how that works. And I was 19 and 20 when I gave birth. And the very short version of my journey at that time was that I was stepping towards something I was really afraid of. There was a part of me that had so much fear I wanted to run in the other direction. And yet, again, ironically, there was a part of me that all that heart, all that curiosity, all of that mystery was also like running toward the same thing I feared. And it's quite a colliding of self and the many aspects of self and the many perspectives and truths. And I just remember being in labor and thinking to myself, you've got to be kidding me. Again, faced with this kind of deep grief and rage, thinking that this is what we go through to birth our babies. Something about childbirth felt like the most delusional betrayal of the feminine. And fortunately, with my big, bold, curious heart, I remember crawling into fetal position, breathing, trying to find my breath, and just again thinking this is unreal, that this is what we go through as women to birth our babies, that this is it. Just this pain, this intensity, and all the fear that I feel, and all the death energy that I feel, and yet I know I'm giving birth. And long story short, my midwife checked me at that point. She was celebrating, "Oh, honey, you're 2 centimeters," which is not very much. And I was beside myself. And again, long story short, I just needed to be alone. So I said, I need to be alone. Please leave me alone. I looked at my partner. I looked at my midwife. I was I need to be alone. Now this is between me and God and my baby. And I got really real, really sincere. And I started to pray. And I knew that I wasn't going to be able to birth my baby if I continued to fight with that fear that I had and that sense of betrayal that I was experiencing. And I believed in my deepest self that there was something more to connect to. And in the prayer, I started to experience my body in a new way. And I started to enter my body in a new way and relate to my body in a new way. So much so that when I looked down, I was continuing to have contractions and I could see my uterus contracting, but I no longer had any pain.
Wow.
And 45 minutes later, I delivered my son. And many things happened. A lot of psychic gifts and activity happened in that 45 minutes. An explosion of light in my brain was something I experienced, a sense of oneness and unity and being able to help others psychically, I was speaking to many souls who were conflicted in many ways. And it was like the whole universe opened. I share that story today because I always refer to it as the beginning of the end. When I talk about my story, when I talk about how I got here in any capacity, in any aspect of my work, it's like, well, that birth literally gave way to many new understandings and many more questions, as awakening tends to do.
I have chills all over my body because these stories are so profound. And I love hearing that at such a young age, you were able to touch such a vast wisdom so quickly. It's really, really beautiful. Thank you for sharing that with us and also showing people what is possible just by sharing this story. That's really, really powerful. Thank you.
Yeah.
And so we decided that we wanted to speak about spirit babies in this conversation. And I am wondering whether you could take us all by the hand and share a little bit more about what are spirit babies?
Yeah. Well, one of my favorite topics in the world. So thank you. It's quite a pleasure to be here and an honor. And, from my personal experience, I would say spirit babies are our ancestors. I find ancestors to be both encompassing of those who've come before and those who've yet to come. So in some cases, spirit babies are both souls who've come before and souls who've yet to come, if not in most all cases. And essentially, spirit babies are the souls of our unborn children, and they are our ancestors as well.
Thank you for sharing it in such a way, so clearly. And it's funny because it's also how I feel it for my own life. Like, I know I'm going to have children, and I also know that I will already know them.
Yes. You do right now.
Yeah. And it's beautiful that you say, like, oh yeah, it's like the ones who have come before, but also the ones who are yet to come, and that they're the same, similar.
Yeah.
So thank you for clarifying that and confirming that, because it's actually what I feel, but I've never said it out loud.
Right.
For both me and my partner, our fathers passed away, and I'm like 100% sure one of them is going to come as our children. So it's it's beautiful that you say that. And my personal interest in this was massively sparked after I read the book Spirit Babies by Walter McKitchen, and my life was forever changed after reading that book. And I'm curious whether you are connected to that book or to him, and whether that has impacted your work today.
That's so beautiful. Yeah, that book it's a true treasure chest. And I love that it's full of stories and spiritual principle. I think whenever we're delving into these types of conversations, learning from stories is so enriching. And I too discovered the book probably 8 or 9 years ago now. And same, I inhaled it. I resisted it. I seem to have that in my imprinting. I like run toward what I resist. And there's some sacred stress in that gives birth to stars and worlds. And so I read his book, and I had, at that time, when I found his book and I read it, I had been a student midwife studying midwifery clinically for many years. I had been a birth doula. I had been to hundreds of births. I was exploring all things childbearing from, a place of study and a place of observation and love, and walking with many families. And so I read that book on a plane. I was flying from Hawaii to California, and I was preparing to teach a workshop at a women's gathering in the woods. And
wow.
I was just enamored by the book. So I get to the women's gathering and I'm on the stage. I'm introducing myself and I'm letting everybody know that I'll be teaching a workshop, or I'm supposed to be letting everybody know I'm teaching a workshop on pregnancy journey. And I called it Journey of Transformation. And I had finished the book on the way to that gathering. And so I'm standing on the stage, and I kid you not, an angelic, illuminating light came down from the sky, like rested on my right shoulder, and then entered into my nervous system, took over my voice box, and spoke into the microphone that I would be teaching spirit baby communication.
What?
And I freaked out. I threw the microphone to the woman next to me and I walked off the stage.
Oh, wow.
And I was on the side of the stage like, like, okay, because first of all, you're like, what just happened? And then I was trying to get myself together and on board with this whole thing. So long story short, I taught my first ever spirit baby communication workshop and completely just threw myself at it, but was very unsure at the same time. And then after the workshop, I went to sleep, was sleeping in the woods, like was zipped up in my sleeping bag like a little cocoon. And that night, the author, Walter McKitchen, came into my dream as a visitation, and he opened up a chalkboard and he said, okay, very good. Now let's review. And the whole night he said, this is where, I want you to work on things. And this is where we're going to start to evolve the conversation. And you're perfect for that. And like, okay, but don't forget this. And when you do this, make it more experiential. And don't forget this part. And he pretty much just gave me a huge review of the work and asked me, like, he's basically like, don't ever stop, keep going. And I remember waking up and thinking, you've got to be kidding me. Like, what is going on? And the next morning, 3 women approached me from the workshop and asked me to give one-on-one readings. And I was like, I was just like, I couldn't even formulate my words. And I was just like, I don't do that, but I will. And I did. And they were beautiful. And my channel started to open immediately. I had gone through some initiations because this was about 8 or so years from giving birth that this happened. So like I said, after I had that kind of a birth experience, it never goes away. Like the initiations continue to happen. So although it was wild that angelic presence came and took over my nervous system for a second and spoke through my voice, like that was wild, but also in the realm of, I was beginning to understand that these things could happen. And long story short, yes, I started giving readings, and it's been since then, I've given thousands of readings and like dozens of workshops, and I've never stopped.
Wow. This is one of the most beautiful stories I've ever heard about someone's calling. Like, it's your calling.
Oh, it will be what I do till the day I die.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I really, really love that. It's such a blessing. There's so many people on this planet who are like seeking their whole life why they came.
Yeah.
And for you, it just landed.
Oh,
it landed in your body.
It took over.
Yeah.
It took over. Yeah. And it was so sweet because I can't tell you early on even how many people would find his book, read his book, be again enamored like anyone would be, and then find out quickly that he's not alive and he's crossed over. And people would, I can't tell you how, like thousands of inquiries I've received where people are like, oh, I looked up Walter and I found he's not alive, but then I found you. And I'm like, I believe that I'm not the only one here to do this work by any means, but I do see how he continues to be a bridge. And for whatever it's worth, I know that I'm here to also, like, with his permission, I feel, continue that conversation and be here for people who are wondering how to move beyond just the book or to make it more personal. Yeah.
Yeah. I have goosebumps again because this is exactly how it happened for me.
Yeah.
I read his book like 1.5 years ago. And then through that book and looking online, I found you.
Yeah.
And then, like I said before we started this conversation, like your name just kept popping up like left and right. And then people I didn't know would like mention your name, or like a friend would mention like, "Hi, I had a reading with Sarah." I'm like, "What? I really have to speak with her." Like it was really meant to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel it's so humbling. It's really like we're all working together and remembering a much bigger part of our story. And spirit baby communication is such a profound pathway for remembering who we are and why we're here. So that sense of seeking or longing spirit baby communication, I mean, the art of preconception, this is a way for us as a human family to restore our connection with, again, who we are and why we're here. And it's the truest gift that comes with it.
I love that you just said the art of preconception.
Yeah.
That feels really right and beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
And connecting to that, why do you feel it's important for people to know about spirit babies, especially when they are feeling into or wanting to, step into that portal of preconception?
Yeah. There are so many answers to that question, and they span like time and space. But I think if we're looking at it from a modern day lens, or what feels more accurate is like, if we're looking at it in real time, infertility is on the rise. Many couples, many individuals are struggling to conceive. And so one answer to that question is that spirit baby communication has a way of creating new perspective, so that when people are going through the processes and sometimes even like the motions of infertility, it can be an emotional roller coaster. It can be a huge financial investment with no guarantee. It can cause so much stress in people's lives. It's actually been studied that people who are navigating infertility are often people who have more cortisol and more stress and more chaos that they are moving through comparatively to like cancer patients.
Wow.
It's not to say that one should actually be deemed as like more stressful than another. I don't think we really can say that. But from a scientific lens, couples and individuals who are navigating infertility are really, I think it's safe to say and fair to say, struggling. And spirit baby communication, again, while it's not just for that population of people, it's because it's something that's on the rise. I've been seeing more of this in my private practice as I teach and as I give readings. And to see a couple go from struggling to thriving, or to see a couple go from feeling very lost to feeling as though they're consciously stepping into a path of healing and remembrance and understanding and kind of opening up that wider lens. I've just seen the most incredible miracles take shape, for people who are either struggling. I mean, maybe people are just seeking to settle into themselves more prior to conceiving a baby, and infertility isn't quite the conversation we're having. But all the while and across the board, I see that spirit baby communication is like restoring an ancient future way of being. And it does create miracles. And it's just been mind-bending to witness so many people's journeys.
Thank you for sharing that.
Mm-hmm.
This also reminds me all of a sudden of a beautiful book written by Sobon Fusome.
Yes.
Spirit of Intimacy, I think the book is called. And there's another book by her that also speaks about connecting with your children before they are born. And as you were saying that, I really got like this confirmation, like this is an ancient practice. Like we've been doing this as human beings for so many millions of years.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think part of this is also like remembering, like this is what we do as human beings.
Yeah.
It's a remembering, and many of us have forgotten. For me, that was what happened when I read Walter's book. I was like, yes, this is what we do.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that you've seen beautiful things happen. And I was wondering whether you could maybe share some stories with us of your clients who maybe conceived after connecting with their spirit baby, or what happened to them when they started learning how to connect with their spirit baby.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I like where to begin. I really should write a book. Oh, I will one day. But the one story that I was thinking about earlier, and I thought, oh yeah, that's a good one. There's so many. I particularly love working with couples in this process. It's not necessary by any means, but I was working with a particular couple, and very sweet couple. And they already had a child, and that child came, what you might say, easily. You know, they decided they wanted to have a baby and they felt ready, and then they got pregnant, and then they had the baby, and that was that. Now, this was their desire to have a second child, and there was a bit more of a struggle in that conception didn't happen right away. There was a miscarriage in the peak of COVID that they experienced, and that loss brought forward some tension. It also shed light on some health concerns, nothing that they could really put their finger on, but they started to work with a few different doctors who were recommending a few different pathways. And in receiving those recommendations, the mom knew that something just wasn't quite right, or she couldn't settle in her system. And they read this book and found out about my work, and we'd had 3 sessions together. So it's always very interesting, this work, because it is and it is not as linear as one may think. And so when we got on our first call, I will just be brief and say that the entire first call was actually about the husband's relationship with his own mother, and then his wife's relationship with his mother. And we spent a lot of time talking about this. And I could tell that at the end of the first reading, as much as they obliged and really showed up with sincerity, I could tell she was like, okay, great. I wanted to have a spirit baby reading, and all we did was talk about my mother-in-law, who I don't really like right now. And I was like, I totally hear you, and bear with me. I've had some experience in this. We'll get there. We'll get there. And the next session, we talked a lot about her recent appointments with her doctors and a surgery that they felt was imperative for her ability to conceive and move forward. And so in tying together the work we had done in our previous session, spirit baby communication, that we were able to delve more deeply into because we addressed this other matter, and coupling that with the information she received from her care provider, we were able to create a significant amount of space and clarity for her journey moving forward. And I always am here to honor my client's own discernment. So of course I didn't tell her what she had to do, but I was able to widen the lens. And I will just say, long story short, she sat in reflection of our call, and some really big healing came full circle. She decided not to move forward with the surgery. And by the time we had our next and final session, they were pregnant.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So spirit baby communication, this is just one example, is, right, we're working with physiology, biology, we're working with, at times, Western medical perspectives. We're also navigating that a spirit baby contract is first and foremost formed in what I refer to as the higher realms. And it is a contract that requires the consent of many destiny threads. And in this circumstance, that included the mother-in-law. And it's a really, really, really expansive, wide view of self and other. And so to be able to sit with people in the process, it's spirit baby communication. It's also being able to understand how, I call it the design of energy movement, how the design of energy movement works. in relationship to time, space, karma, cosmic creation. This is a much bigger conversation, and I'll leave it there. But yeah, that's just one story of thousands.
Thank you for sharing that. And I love that you chose this story to also illustrate that it has so many layers. And it's not just like, oh, let's sit together and have this baby come forward and tell us what to do. Like, I remember when I shared with a friend about this book, that she was like, so what? The baby comes and then tells you what to do? I was like, no. It's like, maybe sometimes there are some stories in the book where that happens.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. Yeah.
Have you experienced that in sessions, that they just come forward and say like, Mom, Dad, this is what needs to be done?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Or even like, it'll be October and I'll know, because the baby will share with me, I'm coming in July. And the baby will also share often spiritual principles, again, like some of this information that connects us to the design of energy movement of like, sometimes it's the mental, sometimes it's the emotional, sometimes it's relational, sometimes it's what needs to get worked out in the spirit realm. Sometimes it's our relationship with time. I mean, every contract, every conversation, there's never been a spirit baby reading I've given that has been the same as any other. And there's not a chance I could make this stuff up. But what I've been able to discover along the way is that there are patterns and there is a universal design to this. And so both are true. Everyone has their own unique unfolding, and there's a universal design. And so what serves and what we focus on is best informed by just being empty. Yeah.
And by being empty, you mean like open?
Yeah.
Yeah.
For me as the reader, I empty myself. Anybody coming to a reading will have the best experience, like the more open they are. And I find that people often show up and I'll speak to it. I'm like, oh, are you feeling some butterflies? Are you feeling a little nervous? Because people might come to a reading after reading Walter's book, especially. And of course, they're thinking, what's my story? Like, what is she going to say? And I usually sit back with so much joy in my heart. And I think, or I might even say to somebody, like, just know that on some level, you already know what's happening. And what I share will probably be familiar, or if not, it will be very comforting or illuminating or clarifying. And that's the goal. Yeah.
I love how you said that you have to be empty and the people who come have to like have their heart open to receive whatever comes. And what came to me when you said that is that is such a beautiful practice of parenthood as well, because we don't know exactly who our children are and how their personality is going to develop. And as a parent, we have to, stay open and curious to the development and the evolving and the enveloping of this child that we get to guide in life.
Right.
So thank you for saying that.
Yeah. Thank you for making that connection. And what you're naming, and the practice of spirit baby communication is essentially doing that from the beginning, you might say, or from the time before the beginning.
Yeah. I love that. And I love how this is also a confirmation for me personally, because I have personally always felt like, okay, who I am going to be as a mother starts now.
It does.
Like, it doesn't start when my baby is in my arms, like how I speak, how I behave, how I take care of myself, how I take care of my surroundings, how I take care of my house. Like, all of that says something about who I am as a mother now already. So I love that you just made that confirmation. So if we're thinking about people who are trying to conceive, and you already mentioned, like, it's important for people to remain open. Is there anything else that you would say that is good to keep in mind when you're trying to conceive?
Yeah. Again, so many things I could say, but let me just take a pause because I want to, just say something that might really help. So many things. I think humans have a lot of ideas about life and what things mean or don't mean. So being open is, I think it's beautiful to be clear, like, we want this. Because when you're trying to conceive, right, there's a conscious choice. It's like there's a knowing. And when we move toward that knowing, again, it's very easy to develop ideas about what that means, like how to get it right, like what month we should conceive in, because maybe we look ahead at the astrology, or, we think, okay, I'll be done with my job at this time, and then we'll have bought in this house, and then we'll do that, and then we're going to do this, and then we're going to have a baby. And I see it across the board, in the lives of seekers and in the lives of all of us, essentially. There's a way where I think sometimes we go about this where we think it through a lot. And I don't want to discredit that. I believe in it to a degree, so to speak. But I think in the openness, there's something so powerful about setting a clear intention and releasing the expectation of the when and the how, and just continually staying open, continually allowing life to show us the way. And I think that a lot of us have beautiful ideas that we're ready to be parents. And I think on some level, when those ideas come to fruition, or like when they come forward very strongly, like we are, there is a part of us that's ready. And I think we just forget, like you just said, that, okay, we think it means it's time to have a baby now. And then what's unfortunate is that in the world, if you don't conceive in the first 6 months, you are labeled as infertile. And I think what's happening is that people are needing to remember perhaps that when that readiness starts to arise, you may just be embarking upon that journey, which could ask of you not only a few months, but maybe a couple of years. And are we really infertile, is just a living question to sit with, maybe a little longer than most of us are comfortable, if it doesn't happen right away. And like you named Sobanfu Somé, she's a beautiful, beautiful ancestor, no longer with us in her body and flesh, but with us in spirit. And her work, yes, was all about understanding that the preconception process sometimes can really best be a few years in the making, because it is an invitation, in her own words, to clean up our mess and to become, it's a journey of become a better version of ourselves. And probably in ways we didn't think we needed to. For this couple, it's a great example, healing their relationship with one another by healing their relationship with the matriarch of the family on the male side. That was a very, very, very important step in welcoming this new consciousness into the lineage. And meanwhile, there was a lot of digging happening and energy going toward possibly doing all of these medical interventions, which I do feel and have acknowledged that there is a time and a place for that. And there are times where I recommend or encourage people to, always at their own discernment, but like really consider the medical path, or, medical treatments or options, of course. But yeah, I think to summarize, because this is a bit long-winded, would just be like really prepare to love yourself through the process. And it may come quick and it may take time, but if you continue to trust the journey and love yourself through, you will have an incredibly magical experience. It might not just be the way you thought it was going to be.
Thank you for sharing that so elaborately. And one of the things that really spoke to me that you just said is that you mentioned welcoming a new consciousness into a lineage.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the time we think about having a baby as being like with our partner and then bringing forth a baby, but it's like a nuclear family, but we're like expanding a lineage. There is all these souls connected to this baby that is going to be brought into this world. It's like the uniting of families and lineages. So I love that you mentioned that so specifically, because it rings so much truth for me. And also the things that you shared about infertility. Thank you for speaking to that, and for also mentioning how important our acceptance and connection with time is in our conception journeys, and when you mentioned that, if you've tried for like X amount of months, like the system that we're in labels you as infertile, like that's a big label and that's a big thing. And that does so much to your mind, your consciousness, your experience of your own body, the ability that you have to trust in your own body. Mm-hmm. Just this label, it shifts and changes so much. And I really appreciate that you mentioned that, and that sometimes we have to commit to a longer period of time, even when we don't know how long that time will be.
Right.
And sometimes it's also about letting go of our planning. Like I felt a little bit like called out when you mentioned that, because my mind works like that. I'm like, oh yeah.
We are, all of us.
Like, oh yeah, my body feels so ready to conceive, but I'm teaching this training and I want to finish the training before I conceive. Like it's how our mind has been taught to work in this society. But when you said that, I was like, oh yeah, but when I think like that, I also like close the door to all the magic that maybe wants to come through,
Yeah.
So thank you for speaking to that. It feels very rooted and it rings so much truth for me. So thank you.
Thank you.
And to close off, I know that you already shared like tons and tons of wisdom, but is there like one last thing or one last like piece of wisdom or words of encouragement that you would like to share with people who are really desiring and wanting to start connecting with their spirit baby?
Yeah, sure. One thing I like to share about is developing a ability through practice and curiosity of, what it is to be in the slipstream of life and to move with the current and to be present, because this world never seems to stop, right? And yet life can very much still be the meditation. So the wisdom I would offer is practicing with great curiosity what it is to both, again, like be a human alive on this planet and kind of like move toward life while also slowing down on the inside. Because sometimes I think we have to resist the mundane and go into a little like meditative cocoon in order to connect with spirit. But I find that because life is the meditation, and because maybe at the end of the day there isn't a difference between what we perceive as magical and mundane. So if there's no gap and we're just allowing ourselves to be in this world, but all the while like getting more in touch with our observer self that is watching the experiences we're having and is witnessing the magic in the mundane, we tend to get what I might refer to as like a lot more signs and confirmations and receive like a deeper knowing of what next step to take in relationship to life, as opposed to disconnected from it. Not that I don't believe in sitting on the mat, but if we turn it on and off, if we turn our relationship with our internal self on and off, that is really, I think, how so many of us get lost or confused. And spirit and our spirit babies are always communicating with us. That's the number one question I get. How do I know when I'm communicating with my spirit babies? And then I get to say with so much excitement, like, oh, you are always communicating with your spirit babies and ancestors. You could never not be. We just forgot that along the way.
Thank you for sharing that. I feel that's really helpful for people to like really land into the opportunity and the possibility to connect with and meet their spirit baby. Mm-hmm. I can listen to you for hours, Sarah. Oh, there is so much to speak about, so much to share about. Yeah. But I also want to be really mindful of your time. And before we fully close off, where can people find you? What's the best way to connect with you if people want to learn more about you and your work?
Yeah, well, the best website to go to is spiritbabycommunication.com. And there are other podcasts people can enjoy. There are courses available online. and I do talk for hours. So you could find more information on that site. And if anyone wants to book a one-on-one reading, there are links on that website for doing so as well.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been a real pleasure.
And I'll be sharing all your links in the show notes so that people can easily find you and connect with you. And I would like to just say thank you again for coming on here and sharing all your wisdom so royally. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please share it with others, with your friends, with your family, post about it on social media, or leave a rating or a review on all the platforms. To catch all the latest news from me, you can follow at the Planting Seeds podcast on Instagram or at Cycle Seeds on Instagram. Or you can go to my website, www.cycleseeds.com. Thank you again so much, and I'll see you next time.